Hey guys, JJ Racaza here. We're going to talk about a couple of dry fire techniques and tricks for some of the newer shooter.
Brought to you by Shooters Global. We created the advanced training system and next-gen shot timers to help you progress faster.
First thing you're going to do is clear your gun, make sure it's completely empty. Check it once, check it twice, physically and visually make sure there's nothing in there because we're going to be dry firing, right? And the way I utilize the shot timer itself, SG timer, is that I have it preset right now to 5 sets. I have it up stop part time at 3 seconds and the delay at about 1.5 seconds. So I don't want to wait too much time. I want to be able to just learn how to get going and start doing that. As a new shooter, you might not be too concerned about a draw. You might just want to concern yourself with a perfect grip. So one of the biggest things and tips and advices I'd give out there is to establish yourself like as if you're in an indoor range and already get your solid grip. You check yourself, you do everything that you need to do to seal any gap or grip on that particular gun. And once you have it set, right, you press the timer to go and then you just bring the gun up. Recording time, and then I'm putting it back, doing it over and over. Doing it again, that's my second run. There's a few things I'm working on here, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So that was all 5 sets. And right here, the timer will be able to show me exactly 1 set, 2 set, 3 set, 4. And every single one of them recorded my first trigger press. I had to make sure I got my sights lined up on a target that I predetermined on the wall. I bring up my gun to it and pull the trigger whenever I have those two things. My grip is solid, my sights is there, I pull the trigger. I have established this process, so when I start going out to the live range, I don't have to think about those processes. Those things I just start to do. But in dry fire, that's one of the biggest things about dry fire is that I establish a certain process that I can repeat, follow, and eventually improve on. And with that, having a timer measure my first run to the second, to the third, to the fourth will allow for me to be able to see all the progress. I set it at 3 seconds. The first time I was at 1.84. I was 1.16 seconds faster than my ultimate goal. And then set number 2, I was 177, a little faster. I was 123, and it records it for you. My first shot to the disparity of what my initial goal was. You might not be this fast, but ultimately you will be able to record yourself and start making those adjustments. Go, hey, 3 seconds might be too fast for me. I'm going to slow it down. So that will be one of the biggest things is just learning how to establish my grip, bring the gun up, pull the trigger once or twice if you'd like. Once you do that a couple times, you'll start to be able to get this down and have a process. So when you go to the range, you're not necessarily fumbling around because you don't know what you're doing. You've done this several times already in the house. And when they tell you, hey, you don't have to shoot fast, you can shoot one shot fairly fast if you'd like to because they don't know when you started. But basically, this is all up to you now. One of the good features about this as well is that there's a reset time. There's that 3 second of pause time that continues to record any noise that you make. I don't want to go in there and start making all these noises to the gun because the timer will pick that up. All I want to do is record my first shot. And the good thing about that reset time is that it forces me to do what's really good is this. As I find my sights, I press the trigger, I sit there and watch my sights again. That particular pause will force me to build in good habits, which is called the follow through. Most shooters nowadays that you'll see out there, they'll punch out and race and they'll come back right away. And they're developing bad habits where they're firing the shot and completing the firing cycle way before they're actually done. And that becomes, it's gonna bite you in the butt later on, for a lack of a better word, because you really wanna practice yourself the ability to complete the firing cycle by follow throughing, achieving another sight picture after that trigger press, and feeling like you still have established a good grip, as if you're going to fire another shot before you reset yourself for the next set. And now when you go to the live range, when the gun actually goes off, boom, you will sit there and follow through one more time as if you're going to fire that next shot before you put yourself a conscious decision to take yourself out of the fight, as opposed to just a normal reaction now that you've done because you've done a lot of this dry fire session incorrectly. So the good thing about the shot timer with the pause time, the way it's set up, it allows for you to be able to do it all right correctly from the get-go without having to, before you even show up to the range. Another thing about dry firing thing that I would like to measure is my ability to be able to load my gun safely. So at first I don't want to do it fast. I just want to learn how to insert the magazine, load it, and all that stuff. So once I'm ready for all of that stuff, I want to learn and master the insertion of my magazine into the gun with my gun pointed in a safe direction. Safe direction is anywhere near where my gun is, my muzzle is pointed away from anything that I don't want to shoot or destroy. This is still a good muzzle direction because it's pointed down range in a safe direction. I don't want to break my wrist like this because now I'm practicing bad habits where I'm breaking my wrist. Although this is considered a safe direction, this is also a safe direction because of the angle of the way the gun points. When it becomes unsafe is when it starts to point towards straight too far up, where you're creating this 180 rule imaginary around you, this little force field. I don't want to go anywhere near that. So first thing I want to do is to come from the low ready up to the target, pulling the trigger. Now I want to learn on how to insert the magazine cleanly onto the gun. So basically I will just work on just doing that. The more reps I do and being able to insert my magazine into the gun, the better I will get at doing that over and over. And I don't have to necessarily do it fast because there's a few things that I want to do here. One of the biggest things about dry fire is you're checking your movement. If I'm constantly in a rush right away and I don't pick up the magazine correctly, inserting the magazine with an incorrect magazine grip is going to be very hard for me to do, and then I'm going to end up pushing this or letting it go and then doing a slap motion. Instead, I want to work on getting my palm onto the gun, onto the magazine, pinching it with these two. Once I do that, I rotate the magazine in, smack it with the palm of my hand. I don't have, if I grab it like this, short, what happens is when I insert it, I don't have this ability to press it hard here. I'd have to let go and smack it with my palm. So the biggest thing is to put your palm on the base pad before thinking about grabbing the mag. As you can see, my finger is all the way to the edge of the magazine, and then I will insert this in one fluid motion all the way through. And once it's there, I don't disconnect from the gun to rotate. The biggest thing about it is once it's inside, I'll just pivot the gun and my hand into the perfect grip that I had earlier that we've already established. Same thing as me releasing it. I'm just gonna pivot my hand away from the gun as if I'm unloading. It's just a reverse movement of what I was doing. So nothing changes from one, whether I'm inserting, going to the gun, or whether I'm unloading and taking the mag away from the gun. So when I'm unloading, all I'm doing is making sure that my palm is on there. I grab it with my thumb, slide it off, magazine, and clear it up, make it safe, do whatever you need under, over, right? Or inserting the mag when I'm loading is the same exact motion. I go in, rotate, and I don't do any extra movement and do whatever I need to do, because the less movement you have with the gun, the better it looks, the cleaner it looks, the more seamless it looks. The more you fumble around with the gun and not know what you're doing, it makes it look like you didn't know what you're doing, and it makes everyone else kind of either pay attention to you more, which you don't want as a new shooter, or it makes you look like you just didn't put the time in, and it makes you look dangerous. So the biggest thing about it is learning the simple facts of loading the gun and understanding what you need to do and how your hand needs to move safely without breaking the 180, without pointing this gun, without doing weird things with the muzzle, where you're keeping this muzzle generally pointed forward. So when I rotate, my wrist never breaks. I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this. I'm shooting and my wrist just rotates from here to this. My finger now is off the trigger. I grab the mag, insert the mag. Once I insert it, rotate my hand. If I have to rack the slide in order for me to load it fully, all I have to do is slide my hand up and then open the chamber, and with the bullet in there, it'll load itself up completely. But I will master this movement over and over until I get used to it, because a lot of times you'll see newer shooters do this weird stuff and then they do all this stuff. Those extra movements will put attention to you, which you don't really want. And once you do that a couple times, then maybe you want to start firing a couple times, maybe dump the magazine that was here, dump it correctly. So knowing how to dump the magazine without having to manipulate your hand extra, grab the fresh magazine, reload, and then fire again. Maybe then you could start working on a more complex drill such as fire 1 reload off the table, fire another one. You don't even need a setup yet. You can use a simple table like this, and then you can use a timer again to measure how fast you can do that or how consistently you can do that over and over while maintaining the higher level of safety the entire time you're using these movements. All right, so now I'm gonna set up my timer for a reload drill. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the training section. Then I'll pick up whichever one. You will have not much of those yet. And then I will look at the time, and then I don't like that time. Since I'm gonna be doing reload, I'm gonna extend those times a little bit. So this one, I want it at least 5 seconds. This is just a wild guess for me. I always wanna control my delay, so I know I don't wanna wait for too long. And maybe my setup time, maybe 6 seconds or 4 seconds. Let's try 4 seconds for now, and then I'll click save. And once I have that, it's all ready to go. So once I got it all done, let's just say I want to practice 2 reps on it. So I have 2 different recorded repetitions. Let's just start with 2. I can go up to as high as many as I want to, but for now, for this purpose, I'll just do 2. So now I'm going to set up my gun. I'm going to insert an unloaded magazine to an unloaded gun so I can actually practice releasing the magazine as well, as that's an important thing because a lot of people will release their magazine with their trigger still in the finger. So the biggest thing is learning how to pull the trigger, finger off the trigger, dump the magazine safely with the finger off the trigger, learn how to insert a new magazine, still finger off the trigger. So here we go again, we're dry firing, so all the guns unloaded. I'm gonna click start. I'm gonna set up again. And then that's my 2 sets. So the thing you'll see here is that this is how soon it recorded, how fast I was able to do it within 5 seconds. I was 4.59 as my overall set on the first one. I was 4.45, a little bit faster on the second time around. I was getting more comfortable, and it also recorded my best time. And then once I have all this information, I can write it down in a notebook as an old school way to do it, or if I want to, I can now just go back to the activity that I had, and now I can see the difference here. I can just go to the date, November 6th, and I can go right to the latest training that I did that day, which was dry firing. I did 2 sets, it says, and then total time was 13 seconds, whatever, but here's my best time, and then I can now look at it. Instead of writing down a piece of paper, now you can have it here. I used to have to write it down on pieces of paper. Now I don't have to do that. I can just go to a specific date, a specific area in the software itself. So it's a really neat little thing that allows for me to be able to do all of this recording, and then now I'm getting used to the movement correctly. So now when I go to the range, it's not the first time that I'm reloading the gun when it goes empty. I now know the motion and all of that stuff. And if I want to practice an emergency reload, I'll just leave the gun on slide stop like this, so I know exactly what the gun does and how to release the slide stop, still maintaining my finger off the trigger, learning how to manipulate all of these other controls, external controls of my firearm, learning how to present. And now with a double action, single action gun, I'll have a different type of trigger when I come back from my slide release position. It'll be single action now instead of the first double action shot that you would have. Now we're gonna work on the third most important thing of you dry firing as a new shooter. One of the things that I like to work on is transitioning. Transitioning is fairly simple. It's basically you've done all the work of learning how to grip the gun correctly, learning how to present the target correctly, finding your sights on target, and shooting accurately. Now we're gonna assume we're shooting multiple targets. Whether I'm in an outdoor range like this where I can set up multiple targets, or I'm in an indoor range and I can only set up one target, you can practice multiple targets. So in an indoor range, what I would do is I'll take the piece of paper and I'll draw small little targets around one particular target. In the outdoor range, if I'm allowed, I will put several targets out there for me to be able to shoot from. And all I'm doing is learning how to fire 1 or 2 shots, move on to the next target and fire on 1 or 2 shots, depending on what I'm working for. But right now, if I want to dry fire it, all I want to make sure, first of all and foremost, is make sure that the gun is clear, it's unloaded. You can either put a magazine in there. I don't like to have any magazines in when I'm dry firing, so just understand that it's fully clear. And then using the shot timer itself, I can now practice the presentation, getting my gun gripped solid, presentation, firing 1, and then learning to transition, and then finding my sights again and learning to fire another one. So that's what I'm doing. So this isn't gonna take much time. I have it set up for 2.5 seconds. It shouldn't take me all that much time for this. So here we go. We're gonna start with this. I'm gonna have 3 sets, so it'll record both trigger pulls. That was my 3 sets, and then I look at the timer again. Second and third one, I went a little bit off time, 2.5 seconds. I slowed it down to make sure that I got my shoulder controlled and balanced. And if I don't really want to look at it in my timer anyway, my best time was 2:34 my first set. I can also go back to the app itself and again, go to the activity, go to that date, and it's now there as well. It shows me all my best times, my repetition, how long it took me to do that, stuff like that. And all I'm doing when I'm recording my transitions is I'm working on my grip, not loosening up as I transition from one target to the next. The other thing that I'm working on as well is learning how to manipulate my trigger finger correctly. And the third thing I'm working is my shoulder. When I'm rotating it, am I bringing my whole hip and body to the right, or am I just moving my shoulder and my lower half is kind of stuck together? So I want to be able to bring my structure over to the right side, where I want to have minimal, very minimal adjustment to my sights going from one target to the next target. And I'll just pay attention to those small things of making sure that my structure, my shooting structure, is the same thing as when I was firing one target, and when I transition to the next, it should be the same thing as well. So dry firing, the 3 most important things I want you guys to focus on is learning how to point your gun to the target safely, then learning how to fire and manipulate that trigger correctly. Number 2, learning how to load and insert the magazine into the gun correctly, and then be able to manipulate it with the safety precautions in mind. Because now that we're doing more things to the gun, I want you to be safe. Safety is the biggest thing that we need to learn. And then eventually you start learning how to shoot not only multiple rounds on one target, but then you learn how to shoot multiple targets. And now you're learning how to manipulate your body left and right is one of those few things. But the biggest thing about dry fire is being able to be comfortable with those movements. Once you're comfortable with those movements, you can replicate it and you can establish your process. Once you have a process, you can repeat it. Once you're repeating it, you can be consistent with your work. Now that you see me shooting it, because I've been doing it for so long, everything looks the same, and it doesn't look like I vary one technique to the next scenario. Everything looks the same because I just repeat what I've learned for the last 30 plus years. So hopefully you can get there in a very short amount of time, and with the help with the timer and all that stuff, you can also progress and chase your goal that way.